what they want to do.
Excellent. Jennifer,
Which one? Sorry.
Esperanza,
It's a Sparta.
Esparza, Esparza, sorry.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer. I currently work at an early childhood development center. I teach 2-year-olds, 2.5-year-olds, and 3-year-olds. Um, I chose school counseling because I really enjoy helping students grow academically, socially, and emotionally. So yeah, that's kind of the main reason why.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. Ariana? No, no, no. Okay. Um, Jennifer Johnson. So I have Jennifer Johnson, Jennifer Esparza, and then I have three Jennifers. Wow. Okay. And Koriyama? Did I say that right?
Karaima. Yeah.
Karaima.
Mhm. Sorry, I'm like blinking. If there's a noise in the background, I'm sorry. But yes, my name is Coraima Morales. I currently am a wellness coach for the school district, or Lompoc Unified School District. I do work with elementary school students,
Hmm.
and honestly, I've been loving it so far. However, I'm not opposed to trying middle school or high school. I would like to experience that as well.
Hmm.
And I got into school counseling just because I feel like every job that I got ended up pushing me towards education. I feel like in my head, I wanted to do public health or like work in a hospital within like administration, but I kept getting pushed towards education. And then the counselor that I work with right now really encouraged me to apply to my program. And so, yeah, then I ended up saying, you know what, I really enjoy this job, so I'm going to continue with it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Curvin, right?
Yes. This is my going on my third year and working in education. I work with English learning students at a high school in Santa Clara Unified School District. Uh, I think like some of the other people have said, I wanted to be maybe a teacher. I spent 21 years coaching competitive gymnastics. And so I wanted to teach, but then I figured taking the amount of time to get my credential and a counseling gig was going to be about the same.
Mhm.
And I'd much rather do it in this way where I'm interacting with the students more rather than being fully in charge of them.
Excellent. Thank you. Jennifer Orozco.
Hi there, my name is Jenny. I'm currently not working in education, but I do have 10 years of experience in the educational field. I was let go in December, unfortunately, due to budget cuts. But I was a parent and community engagement coordinator. So I worked with families, kids, you name it, connecting them to community resources. But that job became a lot of mental health throughout the way, and a lot of like college and career preparedness,
Mhm.
which I really liked. So when I was let go, I thought, you know what, this is time to start the program, and I realized that it aligns a lot with what I ended up liking. So I really liked working with the high school students, so I'm excited to get back in the future.
Excellent. Thank you. And Aries, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm Aries. I recently started substituting this previous academic year, and as nervous as I was to work with middle schoolers, I discovered that they're actually kind of fun. And so
Hmm.
I think I probably either want to do that or elementary school. And currently, like I said, I'm a substitute, and I really love working with kids, so that's my biggest reason for wanting to jump into counseling.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing that with me. That just kind of helps me to understand, the terminology. I mean, to help explain the terminology a little bit more if you, and a little less if you've had all this experience in education, because you've probably heard a lot of the terms already. So, we will get started. A couple of things. We have 5 assignments for this particular course, and then you have your discussion boards. We are overlapping between 8 and 1, so I do realize that you are finalizing. Today was your assignment that was due for your week 8. And then tomorrow, your discussion board is also due. I am going to give you an extension for that discussion board as long as you turn it in by Tuesday. I'm happy with that. And that's also responding to people. So kind of put all that together instead of the Thursday, Sunday situation. As long as you've gotten all of those things accomplished by Tuesday, no, late with that. And that's also because of the holiday, because this weekend is the holiday, and I didn't want you to have to rush back and try to figure out how to do those things or, you know, finish up your other assignment. I want you to get that in on time, make sure that you have that. So that's where I'm working with you guys on that. So again, if anybody asks you, there's a couple people that are missing. Yes, you have until Tuesday to do both the initial and respond. That should give you ample time to do that. Okay. And get your assignment in from your previous course. Then our first assignment is due week 2, and I'll go over all of those assignments in just a moment. We have someone entering in. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with our assignments. Correct. Yes, so Tuesday, July 7th, that's correct. For that first discussion board and response, just a little extra help there. All right. All right, so our course overview, we have 5 assignments. You can see each are worth 30 points. Our first one is ethics and professionalism for school counselors, and that is due week 2. So that'll be due Sunday of week 2, which is upcoming. And in that one, we're going to cover, you have 3 you have the legal and ethical issues for school counselors by Dr. Carolyn Stone, and then you have 3 other articles that you'll need to read. And so after you've completed the reading and watched Dr. Stone's video, you're going to respond to the questions that are listed on the assignment. What does professionalism mean to you? What ethical challenges do you think that you might face as a school counselor? And you're going to discuss one of the ideas from Dr. Stone's video that was significant to you as far as becoming a future school counselor. And then we're also going to include if you have cyberspace or any social media page. How do you use it? How do you think that counselors should use it? And is it a valuable resource for school counselors? And then you're also going to comment on your personal views and values of social media as a resource for school counselors. All right. So this is all of your assignments will be APA format. That includes the title page, the subheadings. Use the questions as a guide for your subheadings. Don't forget your subheadings. You will lose points if you don't include your subheadings because that's part of the APA format. Just download the template, but some people download the template and still forget the subheadings. So it's important to include the subheadings. That's how you know that you're answering all the questions that pertain and you know that you're following the rubric, okay? This particular first assignment is about 3 to 4 pages. Make sure you cite. That's another thing because a lot of people just start narrating, especially when there isn't, it's more of a personal view. A lot of these questions are about your personal opinion, but also quote and cite people that have had similar conversations or that said this or said that or something in there as well. Okay, so make sure you have your citations, your reference page, and you're following that template and you're downloading that template. Okay. The template is on the required template for our School of Education is on there. So it should be easy once you download it. Just make sure you're using it consistently and it has your title pages and everything else on there. Right. The second assignment, which is due week 3, is your personal and professional views on the LGBTQ plus AI issues. Okay, so what you're going to do is watch 3 videos. There are 3 videos listed on the assignment page. It's Becoming Me, the Laramie Project, and the Crossover Kids. And after you review those 3 videos, you are going to develop a well-written narrative, and you're going to answer the following questions. What new learning or changes have occurred for you on these issues after viewing those particular videos? How do you reconcile personal, religious, and professional values for future counselors in dealing with those issues? And then include at least one idea from the videos to reflect upon in your narrative about how it impacts school counselors. New legislation just passed, so that's something to kind of Google about it, and when the new legislation will take place on transgenders and how it affects us in education. So that's another thing that you can also include in there. And then comment on issues that are currently prevalent or being dealt with at your school or work location. So anything in regards to that. Okay. Our next assignment is the historically underserved student presentation. Now, this presentation we will do during our week 5 class. So during that week 5, everybody will come in and present. What you're presenting on is a historically underserved student population. This includes the special needs, the English learners, the undocumented youth, the racial or ethnic minorities. It could be of any ethnic minority, the foster youth, the homeless, the economically disadvantaged, or our LGBTQ plus AI youth. Okay. You are going to describe current challenges, academic barriers, mental health concerns, disproportionality with discipline, access to resources and supports, stigmas, biases, and discriminations. You're going to identify 2 laws that are relevant, either a mental health or an educationally related law. And you're going to cite those and talk about those. That's another slide. You're going to explain how these laws impact students, access to service and support, protection of rights, reducing barriers and inequities, promoting academic and social emotional success. And then you're also going to discuss how it applications as a school counselor. How would you apply these laws in practice, advocacy and systematic changes, collaboration with families and staff, ethical and cultural responsive practices. So those are the questions that you're going to address in using them each as a slide. Okay. So you're going to pick a population, one of the ones that is listed there, and then you're going to present on that. Your presentation shouldn't be more than 10 slides. I think 10 slides is a lot. So I would say anywhere between 5 and I would say 6 and 10. Because you're going to use a slide for each one. But if you have if you have more material or you have more to say about it, you can also add some more 2 slides per the topic, the 1 through 5 that's listed there. And so you'll present during week 5. So this is important because the presentation is part of the grade. So being present on week 5 is important. Now, things do come up, emergencies do happen. And so if you could just make sure that you communicate with me effectively so that I'm aware and we can make different arrangements as to how you would do the presentation portion if an emergency were to occur. All right. And so that is assignment number 3. Assignment number 4 is our freedom of expressions in schools. So we're gonna take the 3 laws, the 4 areas that we're going to address: verbal speech on campus, written assignments on campus, clothing on campus, and off-campus texting and social media posts. And we're going to find a relevant law that is about each one of those areas. And then we're going to discuss the challenges for counselors in applying these laws. We're going to describe strategies for compliance on high school campuses. And then we're going to also talk about any counseling challenges that we may face with on that assignment. Okay. I'm faced in using those laws. I'm sorry. And go from there. All right, so for that assignment, please make sure that you're focusing only on the high school level, not the middle or elementary level, okay? Because the rules are different down there. So that is why we're asking you to focus on the high school level for those 3 areas. Questions, concerns so far?
I have a quick question. Assignment number 3 with the presentation, that one is individually, or is it by
Yes.
individually?
Individually. So
Okay.
again, there are 17 of us in this course. In order for us to be able to get out on time by 7:30, I need you to keep the presentation simple. Okay, so I would say no more than 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so your presentation is going to have the detailedness. Not a whole lot of words, but maybe things that more that explain more what your research covered. Your presentation, when you're delivering it, you're going to highlight those things. I'll go back and read that. Okay, so you're going to highlight, like, okay, this is what I found. This is the law I found. This is what I found was interesting. A couple interesting facts, 3 to 5 minutes, so that we can have, so that we're able to conclude at our regular time. I had, I think, 14 people the last time, and we didn't get out till 8. So even just a couple more people makes a difference. So just really be cognizant of your time, making sure that you don't go over, but highlighting. Make sure that your presentation and the words on your presentation are more detailed. Not so detailed that I can't read it because it's so small, but just has more facts. Like you'll skim over the facts and then I'll read the detailed facts, knowing that you did the actual research on it. Questions about that? Okay. Our final assignment, and we'll go into more detail on that one, is our signature assignment. And just a reminder that our signature assignment is the assignment that we must turn in. So this is due the very last week, due week 8. And the signature assignment, sometimes, especially over the summer when things happen, I'm unable to give you a grade, even though you may have an A in the course and you didn't turn in your signature assignment. So this one is really, really important that you complete it. And that's the way it is for all the signature assignments in the courses. This one just happens to be the last one. So you're going to select a major ethical or legal theme from the textbook. And we'll go over themes today as I dive into chapters 1 and 2 and lecture on those. But the themes are not the historically underserved students, just because a lot of people get that mixed up. So the themes are, what are our legal and ethical themes, like confidentiality, duty to warn. You'll see those in the actual textbook and they will be chapters. So that's going to be important to notice. And then you're going to analyze 3 relevant court cases. Now, our book highlights many of the court cases. So, and it talks about a lot of them. You can use the court cases in there, but you can't reference the textbook as the only source that you read about that court case. Are we clear on that one? Okay, because that's the only thing we can do. You should have another reference for that court case where you read about it and looked it up. Okay. They also want you to, kind of look at some more recent court cases as well, so that you can understand and apply what's happening now in school counseling and how our school counselors being affected today instead of other days. Now you can take a court case from another state as well. But when you're listing that, you want to say, if there is a difference between California and that state, you'll highlight that in your actual assignment. Okay. So right now, I'll give you time to kind of Google a couple of court cases and find some court cases, and you're finding these court cases as they relate under the theme. So it doesn't have to be all three from middle school, all three from, because you're not going to find that. You're going to find an overview. It might be a college court case. It might be a charter school. You're going to find different ones like that. So you want to make sure that it's just, is it duty to warn? Okay. And then those three court cases, someone may have had the duty to warn, or someone may not have had the duty to warn. It may involve a school counselor, or it may not. I mean, you're going to try to Google as many as you can to find a school counselor, but as long as it's a school, like the administrator or so we want it to be in a school, in a school setting. Okay. So that's important too. And then you're gonna provide a comprehensive analysis, and you're gonna reflect and conclude and apply. So the paper has all these different components to it. First, the abstract. The abstract is 150 to 250 words that summarizes the primary legal or ethical issue and outcomes. Okay. Then your purpose, why you selected that issue or theme, and your personal or professional connection to that particular theme. Then you're going to write a problem or belief statement that connects your beliefs to the importance of that particular issue. And then you're going to analyze the three court cases. So when you're analyzing the three court cases, you're looking at issues, reasoning, supported research, past cases, strengths, and weaknesses. I don't want you to summarize the court cases for me. Okay. Not, oh, this court case, this happened, this court case, this happened, that court case, that happened. Okay. What you're doing is saying you're synthesizing and putting all of that information together about the three court cases in that particular section. Then you're going to have the section for findings, and that's the outcomes. That's where you let me know if they won or lost, based on what the issue was and why this one won and why this one lost. So, or this, is it still being litigated? So that's the things that you want to include, right? Then your reflection, how these cases had an impact on your understanding of the practice, and your conclusion, any new learning that you gained from this analysis. Questions or concerns about our 5 assignments? The links of pages are also on the assignment page. I didn't talk about that, but as you can see, this one is particularly about 4 to 5 pages. So when you're analyzing the court cases, you want to put in a little bit of literature review. What does everybody say about that? Like duty to warn. What do all of the research say about the duty to warn? So you want to include that information as well. All right. Questions about our assignments? None at this time. All right, so we'll kind of go over more, and we'll go in more detail later about the court cases and how to start searching for them, and we will go from there. All right. Next, I will begin by lecturing on our First two chapters, chapter 1 and 2, about legal and ethical issues. All right, so this is an introduction to legal and ethical issues for school counselors. And in this chapter, it's going over the differences between legal and ethics as they apply to school counseling, the ethical standards guides for school counseling professions. And I have a video for you that I'll share with you in just a moment. And then discussing the 3 complicated factors that affect working with minors in educational settings and understanding the legal stance of courts regarding parental rights and guiding their children. So, our ASCA ethical standards help to guide us as school counselors with frameworks and ethical practices. It was recently revisited and rewritten in 2022. So the last time it was written was in 2016. And so we have the most updated information. This was after COVID. So that was a lot of research was done, and I'll share with you in that video, like the process and how they came up with new information and how they rewrote the ethical standards. So they became more familiar with relevant laws. Negligence, that's another theme that you'll find in our textbook. Court rulings that help the counselors to anticipate legal implications as they work with minors. So we're going to go over some knowledge of legal and ethical ethics to manage risks effectively, and counselors should always consult their district's legal counsel when confronting legal questions or anything, any uncertainties that they may have. So the difference between law and ethics, law is derived from the U.S. Constitution, the federal and state statutes, and the common law based on judicial precedents. It represents a minimum standard that society is willing to tolerate. It's an interpretation of laws varied by geographic location. So what happens in one state does not necessarily happen in another state. And then judges also rely on prior case law as binding or persuasive authorities for decisions. And you'll see that in our ethical standards, like there are some rules and laws that are different from state to state, and it'll highlight that also in the books. Ethics consist of an agreed upon value guiding the conduct of members in professional associations. So what are our ethical standards? What would most counselors do? That's what the ethical standards stand for. And then this helps us with the law so that if someone does say that we did not follow those standards, we at least have guidelines that say that this is what most school counselors would do in this situations. Ambiguity will occur as context dependent rather than rigid or black and white rules. So there is a lot of ambiguity. It's not going to be just straight black and white at all times. So again, you just want to make sure that you're consulting with your colleagues, asking others, consulting with your district. Sometimes you will have new principals, new people that are just coming out. They might be younger than you are. They might not have as much experience or wisdom as you do. So sometimes you want to go with, okay, what would most people do in this situation? And don't always rely on the person that you report to, because sometimes they will say it's not a big deal, coming from different backgrounds, not having enough experience. And you want to make sure that you're following all of the policy and procedures of the district, regardless of whether you agree with the principal or the person who resides over you. You want to make sure that you are following the district policy, because the bottom line is if you follow district policy and it was written out that way, you're less likely to be involved in the lawsuit. You can even get dismissed in the lawsuit because you followed the policy, but your supervisor did not. So school counselors are supposed to have the highest standard beyond legal requirements. And we also, ethics also applies universally to all professions and regardless of the association membership. So even if you're not a member of the association, you are still required to follow those ethical guidelines. So there are some key distinctions between ethics and law. Ethical dilemmas. These are complex situations without a clear legal breach, often involving multiple right answers, and that requires counselors to use ethical decision-making models. Confidentiality conflicts. This confidentiality is one of the themes in the book, so that's another one. I'm trying to highlight the themes so that you are able to identify the themes once you start reading your textbook. State law mandates that confidentiality mandates confidentiality, but there are exceptions to the rule. Anybody know the 3 exceptions for school counselors that they don't have to maintain confidentiality?
Hurt themselves, hurt someone, and I forgot the third one.
Yeah, hurting yourself, hurt someone else, or someone is hurting you. So if you don't have those 3, write those, memorize those. That's the first thing that you're going to say to each and every student as they come in and begin to speak with you. And they say, once they say, I have something to tell you, you can say, oh, okay, well, thanks for visiting. However, there are 3 things I need to make sure that you understand before you share information with me. And you go over those 3 rules. If you tell me something that someone is about to hurt you, or you're about to hurt someone else, or you want to hurt yourself, I can't keep this confidential. Anything else, I can keep confidential, and I am open to, listening and hearing you. So, just so that they're aware right away that those are the 3 rules that you can't, you have to report as mandated reporters. And that there's no protective bubble. Counselors have to have to understand the laws thoroughly, the ethical standards, the school policy, community norms to minimize risk and recognize knowledge reduces but does not eliminate legal or ethical exposure. So we want to make sure that we're aware of all of those things. Not knowing is not an excuse. You have to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to be aware. So that's why we have professional developments. That's why part of one of the policies for us is that we do suicide prevention in my district. The school counselors do a presentation annually. They review the suicide policy that is mandated for California. That's a law. So in that, I'm educating staff annually. And if I miss someone, then I have to go and educate them and give them the information, because if the staff does not follow our distinct policy for suicide prevention or risk assessments, then they're going to go back to that professional development that I did, make sure that they signed in to ensure that they were aware of our policy and procedures. And then we also have our policy and procedures in multiple places. So again, it's their responsibility to read the handbook, especially if they missed a staff development. And that was because I only present once a year. And it's not my responsibility to go back and find all the people that weren't there. That's actually the principal's job. But that does happen. So, you want to keep that in mind, because there was a time when students you didn't have hardly any risk assessments in the elementary school level. I would say I processed 17 last year. So the rate of them are increasing significantly, all the way down to first grade. So once it's stated or said in some manner, the child needs to be escorted and to never be left alone. And that's part of our policy and procedure. And often that gets forgotten. Like they'll send the kid to you with a note, and that's not following policy. Because what if the child never arrives? Or what if you're not there? So it's very specific, when you look at your policy and procedure. So these are important things to remember. Like every school district in the state of California has a policy on suicide prevention. So it's important to know where that is. So this is talking a little bit about the 2022 ethical standards revision. And I'm going to skip over this slide because we're going to hear a little bit more about that later. So complications is the 13th factor of working with minors, and complications is the acronym that they use to help you define it. So the counselor's values and biases influence ethical decision-making and interactions with minors. The O is for obligations beyond the student, including responsibilities to the parent, the school staff, and the community. This one comes in with sexual because we know that anyone 12 and over can do their own psychotherapy now, can go get medical consent, can get any type of birth control. That's the law in California. So 12 is middle school for the most part, if they haven't been held back. So it's important to know that because that's the one that kind of gets a little hairy when the parents want to know. You've got to convince that student to be able to allow you to share to get more support, because we don't want to be the sole supporter for that individual, right? So we want that individual to seek help from their family or some adult figure once they're over the age of 12. The M is for minors' development and chronological levels that affect competency and decision-making capacities. Privacy, P is for the privacy rights and legal status of minors that govern confidentiality and consent laws. So again, for psychotherapy or any type of therapy, once they're over 12, they really don't need consent from their parents, but under 12, they do. C is for community and institutional standards that shape our ethical boundaries and counseling practices. And the rest are in the. So I don't know why it didn't finish it. Oh, it did. Okay. So when we're looking at our values and biases, we have to recognize our own personal biases and uphold our ethical standards to promote the student autonomy and ensure that referrals are a rare exception. So we don't want to refer out. We are the school counselors. I mean, the time that we refer out is when it's a family involved situation or therapy is required, because we don't provide therapy. We provide counseling lessons. So we always want to touch bases with a student, try to provide some type of counseling or support to them, either in a tier 1, a tier 2, or a tier 3 level. And then once you've kind of supported that student somewhat and you see that they need a more in-depth, like they need a diagnosis of some sort, that's when we use our referrals out to other mental health agencies so that those agencies can give those diagnoses and any type of medication that might be needed. When we send them to the mental health agencies, they give them a full scope of practices. Sometimes they need just group and a specific group, and that mental health agency has that type of group and enough people for that group that you may not have on your campus. So you've been working with them individually, but you see where they could use a group would be supportive for them with that particular topic that you're working with them on, but you don't have any more students to include so that they can learn from one another. And so that's another way that you would refer out. When we want to be aware of our biases, make sure that they don't affect our work. Some common biases are racism, sexism, homophobia, ageism, and ableism. And our ethical practice requires ongoing consultation of professional growth and self-examination. So this is really important for us to make sure that we're aware of them. Having a bias is not the problem. It's about not recognizing it and also imposing your personal values onto others. Okay, so that's what we don't want to do. Recognize that that's a bias, and reflecting on it, and then saying, do I have enough information to keep that thought process is where we need to be. Okay. Let's see. This is one of the case studies that was listed in the book about highlighting ethical challenges in school counselors relating to religious beliefs and pregnancy prevention. So the Seventh Court ruled the district's issues was her approach and not her religious beliefs. So she wanted a school counselor in the district with high teen pregnancies, disregarded the condom use pamphlets and promoted abstinence only literature, and prayed with students in distress. The district did not renew her contract and cited that her actions undermined the pregnancy prevention efforts. So they had a whole policy on pregnancy prevention, the type of pamphlets that they would give out to each and every student, which means they're making sure that everybody receives the same. What you do with the pamphlets, if you make it in an airplane, that's your business. If you take it home, if you read it, if you apply it, that's fine. But the school district had a policy. So even though the school counselor didn't agree from her religious beliefs, she tried other methods. Not that her methods were incorrect, but it just went against the district's policy. She sued for religious discrimination under Title VIII, arguing that her contract was not renewed due to her Christian beliefs. And the case focused on whether the termination was due to her faith or her approach. The court realized that it was her approach and not her belief, and the court noted that the community's strong religious presence, but prioritized the district's goals. The ruling highlights the need to align counseling with district policies, and counselors must balance their personal beliefs with their professional duties to avoid any type of conflict. So obligations beyond the student. So we do have obligations beyond the student that our parents, our teachers, our administrators, the district, and the community. So the ASCA standards require counselors to provide parents and guardians with accurate, objective information aligned with ethic and legal responsibilities. Counselors have to inform officials of disruptive conditions while respecting confidentiality when possible. So we have to build a collaborative relationship with our parents, foster trust, and clarify the counseling program's roles with our community. So you should be sending out as a school counselor all of the information to the community of how you'll be servicing the students, the areas that you'll be touching bases, and you can change those. Like you can set out at the beginning of the year, this is what I plan to do based on the data and the information that I have from last year. This is where I see that our strong need is, and this is what I'm going to focus on. But then something else could come in about October that you need to focus on that becomes a highlight. And so you just kind of shift gears and move in that direction and provide tier 1, 2, and 3 supports in those areas as the data becomes available. Here's some landmark cases on parental rights. So the parents have the right to choose private or religious education for their children. With Wisconsin versus Yoder, the parents could exempt their children from compulsory school past 8th grade based on religious freedom and emphasizing parental rights over state interests. Bethel School District versus Fraser, the court upheld the school's authority to regulate lewd speech, balancing parental rights with the school's role in maintaining order and morality. And Troxler versus Granville, the court recognized the fundamental right of parents to make decisions concerning care, custody, and control of their children, limiting third-party visitation rights. So when we're looking at minors' development versus chronological levels, we want to understand that everybody who's 7 doesn't necessarily have the same output and developmental as their chronological age. So if all the 7-year-olds normally act like this, we could have a 7-year-old that might be stuck developmentally at 4 or at 3, and we need to take that into consideration as we are working with that individual in a counseling component. Privacy rights and legal status of minors. Privacy rights, minors have an ethical right to privacy and confidentiality. Those are themes. Legally, this right belongs to the parents, but federal laws such as FERPA and PREA do not protect the counselors withholding information from parents. States can provide more privacy protection, but not less than the federal law. And parents can retain final authority on disclosure of sensitive information, including HIV status. 18 is generally recognized as the age of majority, but like I said, with California, it's 12 for consenting to psychotherapy, contractual relationships, sexual relationships, and all types of medical consents. Minors cannot legally consent to counseling as a contractual relationship. Most states allow exceptions for certain services without parental consent, and some states recognize legal emancipation or mature minor status for independent decision-making. And California is one of those that does emancipation. And local parenti allows that school staff act in place of a parent managing health, discipline, morality, reasonably, while the parent's authority is temporarily paused. So like if that's just in the event you can't get a hold of the parent and you need to make a decision managing the health, discipline, you'll come in contact with this in your you might have to call 911 if the child is unable to breathe and they're having a panic attack and you're not sure of it because you don't diagnose panic attacks. But, whether you're acting, you don't want to be the one that says it's just a panic attack because we don't have any way of knowing whether it's just a panic attack. So that's what we would call for medical consent, especially if we can't get hold of the parents. Courts can clarify that students don't fully replace parents, but students can keep constitutional rights like their First and Fourth Amendment, but must follow school rules. And schools are seen as more state extensions than parent substitutions. So again, sometimes if the parent says don't transport, don't call 911, then you can't call. So there's some rules that go above that. Like if they're not able to breathe and they pass out, you can call. Even though the parent has said, don't call 911, because we know when we call ambulance, the parents get billed for that. So that's important. And that's why a parent might say no to that. Let's see, community standards and institutional standards. Our ethical standards vary based on local and community values and norms. So we want to make sure that we are in tune with our community, attend community events, understand what's happening, because most of us don't live in the community. Sometimes we do. So we need to understand the community's culture and advocate for changes that need to be made within that community and expand opportunities for those marginalized students that we talked about earlier, which is one of your assignments. So our ethics covers academic instruction, trusting relationships, and informed consent. So schools focus on academic instructions, not individual counseling. So our counselors provide support that helps the student achieve in the classroom. So they can't focus on their academics if other things are going on in their life. If they're coming in, because something else has happened, that's the type of counseling that we want to provide to ensure that they are going back to class calm, ready to receive information, because sitting them in the classroom not ready to receive information isn't helping their academic instruction. Confidentiality forms the foundation of trust and open communication. And without it, students may avoid seeking help or withhold important information. So we want to get out there as counselors. We want to let them know what our roles and responsibilities are to the students, that they can come talk to us. They can take a break in our rooms. We are there to support them. We are there to help them through the hard times. And just so they know where to go to find that trusted adult that they can confide in when something is going wrong. An informed consent is what the counselors must provide when they begin counseling, either individually or in small group. And you are to write on that informed consent, explain clearly the purpose, the goals, the limits of confidentiality in language that's appropriate to the student developmental level, and the process that should be ongoing, and it's not a one-time disclosure. So we want to make sure that we go over the rules each and every time, like 3 or 4 times. Usually when you hold a small group, it's about 6 to 8 lessons. And so I would say in 4 of those lessons, you're going to go over the rules each and every time and go over confidentiality each and every time so that they are aware and they're consistently being reminded. Because from day to day, as things come up within those small groups, confidential information is being disclosed at all times, and we don't want them to go back because they got in a fight with their friend the next day, and now they're spreading all that information out. The opacity of laws and ethical quotes, minors issues are complex and multifaceted, so it makes it impossible to draft laws or policies that cover every single scenario. So federal courts across states interpret the same laws differently and necessitating tolerance for ambiguity. The student ratio, student number of students to client ratio is now should be 250 to 1. However, the national average was 424 to 1 in 2019 and 20, placing significant strains on counseling capacity to provide personalized support. At my school, it's 580 to 1, just myself. As at the elementary level, you rarely have an extra person. So that's something to remember. Middle school, in my school district, it's been 4 years now that they've added a second counselor. We have 3 middle schools, and they average about 600 to 700 students. So that helps to lower the ratio there. And our high school is about 7 something, and there are 300. I mean, there's 3 counselors at our high school. Oh, I'm sorry. Standard of care, which is another theme that is found in the book. It is actions as a reasonable, competent professional would take under similar circumstances. And negligence is another theme that you'll find in the book. And this is assessed by law and ethical standards, policies, case law, expert testimony, experience, and ongoing professional development. All right, so ethical standards and responsibilities to students. We're going to go over that in a minute. So again, our marginalized population is our gender identity and advocating for equitability, access to all student counseling services and resources. So any marginalized population that you might have are historically disadvantaged populations. Those are kind of almost the same. We also need to provide additional protection for bullying, harassment, discrimination, and hate incidents. We have to be careful with our student records and who we share that information with. Our evaluations and assessments, making sure that they are appropriate to the developmental level of students for accurate assessments, and our technical and digital citizen virtual counseling. So Some of us still have some virtual counseling going on. Pretty much most of us in California. I mean, some of the virtual counseling is still happening, but in the public entities after COVID, we kind of went totally back face to face. We'll talk about section 2 and let's see. This is our decision-making model. It has steps 1 through 10 on how to make a strong decision about an ethical situation. And that's something I think is really important to make sure that you review so that you're aware of how do I go about if I need more assistance with this ethical dilemma. And that is it for chapters 1 and 2. I have left. All right. So now I am going to give you an opportunity to listen to the process that occurred as we went over revamping the ethical standards in 2022. We'll get a chance to
Our
hear.
webinar today is
And if you're an Ask a Member, you can get this. You can, if you're interested in hearing more about it. We'll get through parts 1 today, the most important part, and they'll kind of briefly go over. I'm going to fast forward it just a little bit. Sorry about that. I know I didn't share properly. Hold on 1 second.
Between October and January, the states worked on their assigned sections. They met regularly with the other states and with their captain to discuss and process needed changes to our ethical standards. So one thing that's really important, because standards matter, is that all 50 states, this is the first time in ASCA's history that all 50 states contributed to the process of updating our ethical standards to really reflect the voice and the values of our profession.
Can everybody see it and hear
in
the video?
January, all the recommended changes were sent to the ethics committee and to ASCA staff. I will say that the states weren't confined to just the section that they were assigned. They were able to also comment and provide feedback on other parts of the ethical standards, but to break it down and make it easier, we did have everybody assigned to a section. So the ethics committee began meeting about 2 to 4 times a week for approximately 4 weeks from the time that those suggestions came back until February 10th of 2022. And we met to reduce the redundancy in the suggested changes, to smooth out transitions. We also met with the diversity, equity, and inclusion and position statement committees to get their feedback on changes as well. Both of those committees took a really close look at the changes, and they added some language and some suggestions. And then once all of those changes were put into a readable document, the whole document was sent out for public comment. If I remember right, I think it was in April. And then once the public comment period ended, the committee met again and incorporated public comment. There was some really good feedback that came out of the public comment period, and that was also incorporated into the revised standards. and they were adopted officially on July 1 of 2022.
So any of you that have ever participated in a webinar or a session with Carolyn Stone, you have probably heard these terms. And we want to take a minute to just really remember that although this document is newly updated, we've included a lot of feedback throughout the process. Codes are not exhaustive. If we think about our ethical standards, they're aspirational. It's what we aspire to be and aspire to do, but rooted in the reality of we have some confines and some restrictions in our own buildings. Sometimes we have laws that often or sometimes collide with our ethical standards. And so it's not that these are prescriptive of if this, then this. It's important for us to remember that this is an aspirational set of standards that we follow and that we look to when making some decisions as we work with students and work with stakeholders in our buildings. And the reason why we do update these on a regular basis is because our code needs to be reflective of what's happening in society. And we know that there's a lot of things happening right now. And so it's important for us to make sure that that languaging, that inclusion, and all of those pieces are reflected within our ethical standards for the profession.
So over the course of this presentation, we're going to dig into each section that was changed to give you an overview of the specific changes that were made, but just to give you a general overview of the major changes as a whole. Really, there were changes in wording. So words were changed to be more action-oriented. As Dr. Wyckoff mentioned, it's really looking again at the changes in society. So a lot of addition of inclusive language, emphasis on safe school environment, ensuring equity, and you'll see that as we talk about some of the specifics, that's really incorporated more throughout in the new 2022 standards. And then again, incorporating the Ask a National Model language of the 4th edition. So in overall, some standards became bigger and were expanded. Other standards became smaller and were made a little bit more concise. Also, some of the order of the standards were changed just to create a better flow as they really read through. I think that's what the committee and all the states did a really nice job, the representatives, of really looking at everything holistically, looking at wording as well as flow. So really trying to make it the best that it can be at this point. And then in general, 2 standards were eliminated from the previous standards. So the previous 2016 standards had A.2.H, which really dealt with HIV, AIDS, and reporting communicable diseases to a third party who might be at risk of contracting a disease. And this was really eliminated because in the midst of COVID, it was confusing and it was really too prescriptive following the COVID-19 pandemic. And also with the recognition that we do have the section related to the duty to warn, which is already covered. So really felt like that specific standard wasn't needed at this point. And again, in the midst of the pandemic, it was really too prescriptive. And then we also, or the committee also eliminated the previous DK standard. And that one really had to do with school counselors who were site supervisors of internship students using evaluation tools when supervising those students and the selection of appropriate evaluation tools. And really that was eliminated because there's a recognition that universities typically provide site supervisors with the evaluation tools that they're required or asked to use. So school counselors aren't typically selecting those evaluation tools on their own. They're given to them by the university they're partnering with. So really recognizing that wasn't needed. So that one was eliminated as well. So those were the 2 standards that were fully eliminated from the 2016 standards. And then in total, 34 new standards were added, which we'll talk about over the course of this presentation.
So in the preamble and the purpose, which is the very start of our ethical standards, there were changes to the wording and some language updates, and specifically the sentence about school counselors having unique qualifications and skills was moved out of the first paragraph and right to the very top of the second paragraph, just because it flowed a little bit better. But also the wording was changed up a little bit to say that they have the skills to implement a comprehensive school counseling program that addresses pre-K through 12 students' academic, career, and social and emotional development needs. In the preamble and purpose section, there were overall language updates focusing on the importance of a physically and emotionally safe environment that's inclusive, that's healthy, and making sure that school counselors recognize our duty to make sure students are getting equitable access to a school counseling program, and supporting students from all backgrounds, from diverse backgrounds. So those were the main changes in our preamble and purpose section.
So I'm going to give you a general overview of Section A. Section A is quite lengthy, where quite a bit of our ethical standards sit in and especially as it relates to confidentiality and some other pieces. So Section A will go on a little bit. So we put an overview here. Again, like Wendy just said, there's a greater emphasis on equity and that creating and sustaining the safe and inclusive environments. So that it's making sure that it talks about our actions and our role in doing that as school counselors. Some pieces about making sure that we are addressing personal biases and receiving training that's relevant to culturally sustaining practices. And that was a lot of feedback that came from our DEI committee as well. We changed language, I think, and Jamie talked about this throughout, from like the intention, but we're increasing that person first language instead of that deficit language. Standards that are mentioned there were specifically addressed from lessons that we all learned as a profession from COVID, and helping us just make sure that our standards are applicable to maybe any other pandemics that we may face in the future. There were two sections that were renamed. So A5 used to be dual relationships section, and now and managing boundaries, and that has a different name now, and we'll go through that in a minute. And then A11 was bullying, harassment, and child abuse all lumped into one section, and we recognize that those things don't fit together, and so those two sections specifically had a major overhaul, which is where some of those 34 new standards really fell in line.
So a couple more highlights: dual relationships, bullying and harassment, and child abuse are all other themes that are in our textbook. So if you want to write some of these themes down, if there's anything that's resonating with you that you might want to begin looking for those court cases. These are, I'm just highlighting every single time a theme comes up, so that you are able to kind of say, I like that one. I think that's something I want to pursue, and that's something that I want to take a look at.
So just to start at the top of A, and if you have your standards, the new standards, you can access them on ASCA's website. If you have them to kind of follow along, it may make this seem a little bit less confusing. But so again, some of it is just wording, and some of it is actually new standards that are added. So as you see here, A1B, that we added this piece about fostering and affirming all students and their identity and psychosocial development. So this is not only talking about just gender identity, but just all students fostering their identity and that full psychosocial development. We thought that was incredibly important. A2P was also a brand new standard in advocating for physical and virtual workspaces. Again, this came directly from lessons learned during COVID that are arranged to protect the confidentiality of students' communications and records. We learned that during that time, some of that confidentiality was hard, especially as we're transmitting things via the internet. And so that was a new standard. In A3, which deals with comprehensive school counseling programs, we reordered those standards in that section. So it's not that there's brand new standards there, but it was reordered to help school counselors really understand how to build that comprehensive school counseling program and what our responsibilities are in that realm. And then A4, there are two new standards here. One is addressing personal bias related to students' post-secondary choices and recognizing that, that a four-year college is not the only option for students and likely is not necessarily the best option for all students, and that we need to make sure that we aren't projecting that bias on students as we're helping them with their college and career planning for post-secondary. And then also in the same vein, addressing any inequitable systemic policies and practices related to students' post-secondary choices. So this could be if your school building has academies or things of that nature, and if there are GPAs or certain tracking things that are keeping students either out of or thrusting them one way or the other, really addressing those and how that's part of our role as school counselors is to look at those from a systemic lens and really talk about how those policies are impacting students negatively. More in so A5 is one that used to be called the dual relationships piece, and some great feedback came in regarding this section. And so that section has been renamed Sustaining Healthy Relationships and Managing Boundaries. And I think we had some great conversation as a committee in this section and recognizing that dual relationships happen, and in some places dual relationships are necessary in order to make connections with families and students. So things like attending graduation parties or attending specific events might be necessary in order to gain trust of some of our families. And the way it was written in our old standards, and again, standards aren't prescriptive, but the way that it was written in our old standards, it almost made it seem like that was a no-no. And so in this section, we added 4 new standards to just help us kind of think through when those dual relationships happen, how to navigate it and make sure that it's a healthy relationship, and how we manage those boundaries. So that section is pretty extensively reworked. In group work, we added 3 new standards there. We want to talk about culturally sustaining group counseling services. So that was consistent language throughout the document, the idea of culturally sustaining. Also, equitable access to participation and removing obstacles to participation in groups. And so we're making sure all students have access and not just some students. And then topic selection. And we had quite an extensive conversation around this one as well. And just realizing that there are topics that are probably not best suited for groups in schools, topics that could stir up a lot of emotion, that would be hard for a student to pack back together and head back to the classroom, but also a place where we as school counselors might not have the expertise and might be kind of out of our scope. And so that piece was added. And then in A8, student peer support programs, there were 3 new standards added there. And again, the bulk of that was around equitable access, representation, making sure that if we have peer support programs, that those that are part of those peer support programs are representative of our whole student population, that it's not just a certain group of students that get to be part of those programs. And making sure that if we have those programs, that we're sharing the goal of those programs with our stakeholders, whether it's parents, community members, principals, teachers.
Haley, did you want to speak at all to A5J about the conflict of interest?
Sorry, I kind of skipped over that one. In that section, we just talked about as school counselors, we know that we have some power and we have some privilege when we're working with families because we're seen as, I don't want to say authority figures, but we are seen as important. And so just being aware of self-promotion, whether it is if you have private practice in the community or whether you have some sort of side connections, side businesses, that you would want to make sure that there isn't some sort of conflict of interest when you're engaging in those healthy relationships with families.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So A9 is one that comes up a lot in our frequently asked questions, in talking about and thinking about when we work with students who may be thinking of suicide and how to approach that. So it's a really important new language that was incorporated into A9B specifically. And unfortunately, there are some districts that require their counselors to use a specific risk assessment tool. The previous standard kind of spoke a little bit to the selection of a tool. We want to get away from that. We focus more on how it is almost impossible to accurately quantify a level of suicide risk. And this is really important, and a lot of research bears this out. So we want to move away from telling people that their child is low, medium, or high risk. So in this standard, it was reworded and emphasized that the importance of recognizing that challenge in quantifying risk. And then if you are required to use some type of risk assessment, to understand that it is only an information gathering tool. It is only one piece of information in a process. And when we are reporting the results of that assessment to parents and guardians, that we never negate risk of the student's potential harm to themselves. And we always are going to report that risk to parents. So students may minimize risk to avoid scrutiny, and it's our imperative to let parents know that we've done an assessment, that there is some risk. It's to underscore the need for parents to act. It's not to report a judgment of risk level. So important new language in A9B.
So in another addition, kind of continuing with A9, a new standard that was added is the importance of providing culturally responsive mental health resources to parents or guardians throughout the process, as Dr. Rock was just talking about, that's an important step in providing student support and making sure that it's not just resources, but that they're culturally responsive, and that school counselors are really intentional about the resources that they're providing. So moving on to section A10, section A10 was renamed to marginalized populations, which was previously titled underserved and at-risk populations. So really recognizing that marginalized populations would be a more appropriate term to encompass the information in that section. Two new standards were added, standard G and standard H. So G really talks about advocating for access and inclusion and opportunities for all students, such as AP classes, gifted, honors, dual enrollment classes. So really making sure that we're advocating for access for students individually. And then H really, again, talks at that systemic level of systemic change and looking at actively advocating for changes at the systemic larger level that is needed to ensure equitable participation for all students across courses and programs and things like that. So really looking at both levels that we're advocating for students, but we're also advocating for systemic change at that as well. And then section A11, as mentioned earlier, this was pretty significantly readjusted. There was a lot of standards that were added, and it was a new section title. So as mentioned before, the child abuse section was separated out of this section because really we realized that it didn't fit very well. They really didn't go as well together. So that was separated into its own section. And then this section was retitled Bullying, Harassment, Discrimination, Bias, and Hate Incidents. Again, I think this section really showcases the responsiveness to societal changes that were happening, really trying to encompass equity, inclusion, and promoting safety for all students and belonging. So in all those changes and those additional standards that were added, one of them, the first one really talks about recognizing that bullying, harassment, discrimination, discrimination, bias, hate incidents really can be rooted in race, gender, sexual orientation, students' intersectional identities, and recognizing that that is an important component of where some of those can come from. And then again, advocating at the systemic level of policies. So really ensuring that policies are created for all students to ensure that the school is a place of safety, belonging, and justice. Again, you hear that language throughout, justice and belonging. And then also recognizing another standard, and I think it's C, talks about, or it might be E, one of the additional ones that were added in, I think it might be E, but talks about recognizing that bias incidents don't just affect the student, and it's not just potentially traumatizing for the students involved, but that it really affects the school climate and culture as a whole. So it's important for school counselors to engage in active practices that support a positive school climate, that supports a sense of belonging. Again, looking at that systemic level, that's really an ethical responsibility of school counselors to support that at the large level in the school climate to ensure that's a place of safety. And then the last two additional standards that were added to this section really relate to prevention and response. So talking about prevention and response to bullying and harassment, discrimination incidents, and looking at collaborating with administrators, providing support, healing, recovery for students who are engaged in these incidents, and then just again actively responding. That response, that action is really important for school counselors to engage when those incidences occur. And then, as I mentioned, the child abuse section is now its own section in A12. So not too much was changed in that section in terms of the content, but just some of the wording was changed. Really, it was rearranged a little bit. Wording was changes. One of the standards was separated out to be more concise and specific and easy to read, but it really covers many of the same topics that were in the 2016 standards. And then A15 is where technical and digital citizenship comes into play. I think, again, some lessons learned from a lot of school counselors who engaged in virtual school counseling during the COVID pandemic, and a lot of things that came up from frequently asked questions and what that looked like is you can see kind of interwoven in this section as well. So 3 new standards were added to this section, and they really talked about challenges with confidentiality when using email. So really recognizing those challenges that are inherent in using email, that we can't guarantee confidentiality, and working to establish boundaries for responding to emails. So ensuring that students don't think.
Okay, so we will get through all of that, but that's pretty much all of section A. Section B and C cover other aspects but this is section A is the one that has the most as it relates to the school counselor and the students. So B and C are about the parent and parent rights and so on and so forth. So those are the other additional areas that we won't get to today, but I usually don't do that one either. But if you want to continue with that, you can find that on the ASCA website. As a member, you're entitled to viewing the rest of that, just so you get an idea of what was discussed, what was replaced, and how the changes have been made for us through the ethical and legal standards. All right. Thank you so much for this evening. Again, just to recap, you have until Tuesday, July 7th I'm sorry. What is Tuesday? Tuesday is, yes, July 7th. You have until Tuesday, July 7th for your first discussion board. That's just because of the holiday and the overlap for your week 8 and your week 1. And then I will see you again for our next live session on July 15th.
And discussion board 2 will be that coming Thursday, July 9th.
Yeah, you'll have the next one on July 9th, and everything will go back to it. I'm just giving you a little extra time due to the holiday for Saturday, and then also because you're closing out your old class, and I want you to focus on that. So if you're running behind on that, I'd rather you complete that assignment and then just get a little extra time for that. So yeah, you will be running into your other assignments, but just there's only one discussion board, so just it should be pretty simple. And I will see you again on July the 15th for our next live session. You can start looking at your historical, your marginalized population, which group you want to take a look at. Begin your presentations. Remember, your presentation is going to be about 3 to 5 minutes. That's about it. 5 is the maximum. 3 is the minimum. And then you also have your signature assignment, which I've kind of gone over with you, and I've discussed that you'll pick a theme that is in the book, and I've been highlighting themes throughout this first session, so you have an idea of some things that you want to take a look at and finding 3 court cases that are relevant to that theme. All right. Thank you so much. You guys have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.